What's up, friends? Mike Myers here with the Songwriting for Guitar podcast, episode number 3, Bonnie J. Baker. Bonnie is a multi-platinum songwriter, and she has had amazing singles cut with so many artists that I could spend this entire episode just talking about that. We're going to talk about how she got started and this period of time a little bit later in life where for 2 years she was kind of figuring out and rediscovering songwriting again. And the process and the journey is super fascinating to me, and you're going to love it. So let's not wait. Let's dig into episode number 3, Bonnie J. Baker. When I look at all the things that you've done, the one thing that strikes me constantly, because I could just go through your website and the catalog and the songs that you have, and I can look like platinum 2 times, number 12, 6, like you are by far the sweetest, most grounded person I have ever come across when it comes to that. And to me, like we talked once before, and you get a vibe of someone just in those first moments, I feel, when you talk to someone. And I felt like I'd known you for so long, how warm and just very open you are. And that also comes through in your songs. Do you feel like that connection between your writing and just who you are is just so just intertwined?
Wow, that is that's an incredible statement and question, and I'm digesting it as we speak. My goal when I entered this world of creating songs was to have longevity. I wanted to be able to span several decades. I had in mind 4, and so I tried to come at this with a classic approach to lyric and melody writing, that if you have a hit in 2008, that in 2023 it could still be relevant. I just always had that in my brain of trying to speak in a way that had kind of a classic approach to it. Now, don't get me wrong. There are some hits on the radio that are very 2020, and I love them. And so I appreciate the question, and I want to just say that the amount of awards, or I had a goal to sell 10 million records, and recently kind of passed that mark, and I'm very humbled by people buying albums or people downloading an album, because we work so hard on this music in our little spaces, and then to have people listen and respond to it is probably the greatest achievement I could ever have. I love writing. I love working with artists. I love sussing out what messaging we want to work on. But when that message lands is really my greatest joy.
There's so much in that entire statement you've made. With that idea of longevity, like, I want this to not just be a current thing or just this, I want something that's going to speak decade after decade. Were you always in that mindset? Like, when you first thought of the idea of writing songs, what was your introduction to that process or this idea of expression?
Well, it's interesting you ask, because my beginning, I have a degree in English, and I started my master's degree in creative writing. I wanted to get a master's degree, and I studied fiction. And many of my absolute heroes were people like Ann Tyler, and who has written just an incredible body of work. And she's not the flashiest, most well-known author in the world. And she's literally been writing books for 30 years. And I find her newest book to be I find her newest book to speak to me as well as her first book. And then you had To Kill a Mockingbird. I was such a fan of that story, and you take that story and you can read it in any year, and the values and integrity of that body of work will stand the test of time. So I think actually I was responding to the authors on a fiction level that really spoke to me, and then it just kind of parlayed itself into writing songs. But then also I have many heroes as songwriters, Carole King being one. Tapestry was just a huge part of my growth as a writer, and I can go down the rows of people that were not necessarily my peers or people that were current when I found them, but I still found so many things to listen to in their work that spoke to me as an 8-year old, as a 10-year-old.
What I love about that, you said it spoke to you, because I feel sometimes songwriters are caught up in the game of, okay, so what's charting on the radio, that needs to be my thing. And they just absorb themselves, and they're trying to pull from something to get inspired. And they may be, kind of pulling from the wrong well. It just may not be the thing that ignites that fire, or whatever metaphor you choose to use. So hearing things that speak to you, that's going to be the thing that kind of ignites your creativity, or the thing that, if you're looking for that longevity, you need to be on the search for that, and not for something that necessarily might be, oh, that's the number one because it has, the cool, it references Instagram.
Yeah, and I think, to put it in other terms that piggyback to what you just said, is if you were looking to the external to motivate you and drive your passion, it's different than looking to the internal to drive your passion. My insecurities make me feel like no one wants to hear my story. So therefore, we go outside of ourselves. We want to live this Instagram life that looks sparkly and shiny and exciting and everything. And really, I feel called to dig into the internal life of myself, because the childhood, the stories, the trauma, the challenges and the victories that I have very well may speak to someone else who's having their own challenges.
I think of myself. I remember growing up and going to punk shows and standing and being like, yeah, and just like, loving the atmosphere. And then, fast forward, I remember going to see Jason Isbell and James McMurtry, and I was sitting down. Mm-hmm. And I was just, you're right, eyes closed, and just like being like listening intently to lyrics, and just like the feeling being like, oh, this is fucking awesome. This right. is, before right. It was the loud, like, fuck yeah. And now this one was just the quiet, just inner self of just like, this is so good. And I looked around, I could see people just sitting there absorbing it. And both of those are fine.
Right. There's value in both of those. Like, yeah. I have a 17-year-old who will go to, he can't right now, but he loves to go to these shows that start at 2 a.m. He gets there 4 hours early so he can be on the front row. And those artists speak to him. He comes home fired up about creativity and songs and music and life and friendship and all that. So voices can be louder or softer, or, there's no genre that I'm putting on this. It's like we have great artists out in the world in every genre that speak to us. And I will say some of the artists that he follows, they have created communities that are strong with integrity.
The idea of art and creation and expression and the meanings behind it and what it says.
Right.
That stands the test of time.
Exactly. And that is what gets me up every day, to walk down to my studio office that I have and get to work.
So when you came to Nashville in the early 90s, what was the experience for you? Because I would say, coming into writing in the perspective as a female, kind of into that world, which seems very, especially in the country world, Nashville, very dude centric.
Yes, but 1992, we had just had the 80s where female artists were crushing it. We had Katie Oslin, Susie Boggess. I could go on and on and on. Pam Tillis, Emmy Lou had had a resurgence and a writing streak. So we had a lot of very strong females that were selling records. Reba, on and on. So I got here in '92, and what I noticed first and foremost with Nashville is what a community it was. It was very much a very tight knit community. And, as an outsider coming into any story, you wonder where your place is. And so my first apartment was right down on Broadway, close to Music Row. And I just walked places, got to know the little live venues that were close by, and literally um, realizing that most songwriters like myself were underfunded, as it were. And so I started a songwriters night that the price of admission was just some canned goods. Like, just bring whatever canned goods you have, and that will get you in. And so I could invite my friends that I was meeting to come and play, and people coming to the show. It didn't cost them any money. They could bring, one canned good, and they would get in. And so we started this where we would, each month take this to the mission and give them some canned goods, and it didn't cost people any money to get in. And so during that time, um, I met some songwriters. Someone had a show booked at the Bluebird, which was very hard to get in. And last minute, they had one of their four people drop out. So they asked me if I would fill in. So I went to the Bluebird and played in a round. And in the audience that night was a guy named Brett Beavers, who was playing bass for Martina McBride at the time. His wife was also in the business. He was from Texas, and I mentioned I had moved to Nashville from Austin, Texas. So fast forward a few weeks later, he and I cross paths, literally, walking, and he stops and he points at me and he goes, "You're from Texas." And I'm like, "I am." And he said, "Well, my name is Brett Beavers and I'm from Texas." And literally, he grew up just down the road from where my parents are from. We connected on that level. And he said to me, "I just signed a young writer artist. We have a joint venture with Sony. Would you get together with him? He's from Texas as well." And I was like, "Of course." And that person was Troy Johnson. Troy Johnson got a Dixie Chick cut not long after that. Some Days You Gotta Dance, that Keith Urban also cut.
Yeah.
Troy and I became fast friends. He's like my little brother. And we spent so many days in the upstairs of his little house that was right there close to Music Row. I could walk to it. And in a house that had no air conditioning upstairs. And we had a little 4-track. And we literally worked days and days. We'd do 3 tracks, bounce it down to 1, 2 tracks, bounce it. We were the first people that I knew of that we started doing our own demos. And those first few years of my life with Troy Johnson are absolutely the foundation of who I am as a writer, because he and his voice is ridiculous. If you've ever heard his voice, he and I wrote a song during those years called "Tonight" that's on a Sarah Evans record, and also the publisher I signed to during that time was a huge Troy fan, but Troy was at Sony, so she signed me. It's like, okay, we'll take the B team. But sometimes the B team gets to come in on Super Bowl Sunday and freaking win the game. So, my first few years literally hinged on there's a Bluebird show, somebody, dropped out, will you step in? Mention I'm from Texas. Brett Beavers, you're from Texas. Will you write with a writer I just signed named Troy Johnson? Those five things right there are the whole foundation of why I'm even here.
That to me, just those five things, how they just line up. Do you feel, for some people, they'd be like, that sounds like some hippie shit, Mike. But do you feel like the universe in some capacity when you focus and you listen to what you feel you're supposed to do and you do it, even when the thing is not defined? I think Rob Bell talks about that. I love, talking about Rob Bell a lot, but he talks about the idea that sometimes you go to the next thing when the next thing, you don't know what it looks like. All
Right.
you know is you need to go there and you follow it. But when you do, that's where those things that the story gets so interesting, because nobody tells a story of like, I went to Nashville and I made it. That's
Right.
boring as hell. But
Right.
you just told about like, this dropped out. Then all of that. Do you believe that when you listen to that sort of that pull or that call, that's where things, and you're attuned to yourself, I guess, that's where things happen, and that's where the most joy and the stories are found.
Yes, I feel like I have learned through the years if it's not a hell yes, it's a no. That's first and foremost. Secondly, my intuition and gut instinct, those are geniuses that I need to listen to. And the moments in my career that I've listened to my gut instinct, my intuition, that still small voice in your head or your heart, however you want to frame it, the universe, God, whatever that spiritual connection is that, in your language, follow that.
There's so many things, and just that I have questions about, because like in that 2-year period, I feel, was it this daily, almost like pendulum swing of it's over, pendulum swing
Yes.
the next day, it's not over.
Mm-hmm.
I don't, and just like live it. What were some things, especially for people that are hearing this, that go through those questions that maybe they have nothing, as to them, it feels like nothing. I don't want to say nothing, because there's a lot of good things that we do that we overlook because we don't think it's good, depending on what we measure. What is for you? How did you keep yourself grounded in those moments that you're talking about, stillness, which is super important? How did you keep that, I guess, like yourself grounded just a little bit? To just say,
From
Bonnie, it's
going,
okay. Yeah.
yeah, from going insane.
Yes.
Uh, how do you stay here? I'll give you the story of my life in the last 2 years. I needed to go to therapy. I had some childhood trauma that I have lived with and reacted to my whole life. A lot of the unhealthy behaviors and patterns I have all stem from childhood. Well, guess what? When your career is not in power mode, you have time to go to therapy, which I did. You have time to read books, which I did. I had time to journal, which I did. I had time to ask questions. I had time to get curious. I started taking, mix with the master's workshop classes and learning how to mix vocals, because I have spent many, many, many dollars on people mixing my demos through the years, and some I loved, some I didn't love, but it was a lot of money. And so I got curious. What makes a vocal that makes me just go, wow, I really want to hear this song? So I started basic EQ, compression, just you guys know, you're
Mhm.
producers, you understand all of those things. I just got curious. I started buying some gear and putting together, a little bit of a studio that I could do vocals in my own little space so I could work on them. That has been so rewarding because I love that. I love writing a song, but then I love hearing where it's going to go, production and vocal production and that kind of thing. So I got curious about other aspects of my life. I started teaching. I um, i was offered a position at MTSU to teach commercial songwriting, gender and identity. And I was like, yes, the answer is yes. I want to do that. So I wrote the curriculum from the ground up. They had never offered this class. So I got in to the class, and I love my students. Literally, they still text me with, song ideas and, hey, I just finished a song. I love that. And then the other thing was, I had been involved in a documentary about gay women in the music business. And so in these 2 years, I was able to write a song that they're going to use in the film. I was able to be a part of the film, go through that process. Um, they have a great producer and director, and I've learned, how that process works, because creativity is creativity, whether you're doing a television show or you're doing a game or whether you're doing a documentary or writing a song or writing a book or doing workshops. All of that is creative. So for the first time in my whole adult career, I was able to be curious about what other things and ways to be creative, which kind of freed me up. I've still been writing these 2 years. I probably have 50 songs or so I've written in 2 years, but I was at a level of like writing 80 a year, 120 a year. I mean, just that's all you had time to do. And then the last thing in these 2 years, I mentioned my son is 17. I've been able to just be a parent and focus on him and his journey and his health and well-being. And probably something that had been a cornerstone of my life, but I'm not sure I had always given it the attention it deserved and needed. So all of those things came into my life since, July of 2018, because I opened myself up. I'm still a songwriter. I still love, production. I still love studio days. I still love writing 5 days a week. But because I opened myself and got curious, I have been able and allowed other venues to walk into my life that I have really grown from. So when there are those moments when the writing is tedious and hard and challenging, find some other ways to be creative, to give your brain a minute to then re-engage with writing. Writing is should not be hard. Being a creative should not be the hardest thing you do all day. It should be the most lit up, passionate fire that you start, and it should be easier than we make it sometimes. So if you're finding it difficult, and I'm not meaning walking away, I'm not saying when a career gets hard, you stop. I'm saying opening yourself up to other avenues of creativity a lot of times will loosen up what's going on. And, I have to say, I feel like my best songs are in front of me. I've never felt like my best songs are behind me. So that's the other reason I just don't want to stop yet. It's like I want to see what is next, what songs are going to be next.
I, all of that, the idea that you are just chasing your curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and just like what is this is interesting, because now in that stillness or those moments to not that are you're not being bombarded with like, well, my publisher's saying I need to have this many songs and we've got to get that you stopped and you were looking at, well, what does pique my interest? Where do I want to go? And just like the time you spent with your son, those 2 year periods, that is something you will carry with yourself for the rest of your life. You're going to look back at that period, and it's just, to me, remarkable. Those are incredible things too. As it's kind of like that daily struggle of like, well, what's going to happen with my career? All those things that you did are amazing, and people do fill their schedules with too much, because sometimes they're told you've got to write all the time. And sometimes people around there are like, this just doesn't feel good. So
Right.
hearing that is very refreshing, where it's saying, don't give up on writing, but that's okay. Like, it's not, I don't think people hear that enough. I think some people go out and they buy lyric books and they watch these tutorials and they're like, what's wrong with me? Why
Right.
can't I do this? Is there something wrong with me? And it's like, no, you're fine. And
Right.
that's what I'm hearing too. And that's what I love about, um, just in our conversations, I don't think creative people hear enough, like, you're fine. I think that maybe that's why I watch still a lot of Mr. Rogers, because I'm desperate to hear a lot of the times, like, you're fine. You don't have to do anything sensational. Right now, how you are is perfect.
Yes. And if we as creators gave ourselves room to breathe and room to explore, I think we would find ourselves in a much stronger case. I do think the workaholic syndrome that I see is based on insecurity. I know for me it was. I've got to keep my publisher happy to be able to keep a job. Well, no, we have to make ourselves happy. And that's just kind of I don't want to be disparaging, but that's the worker class mentality is I have to work hard enough to be accepted. And that's just not true. That is just not true. It is, we need to be productive and healthy. And, yes, if you're signed as a writer, you have to put out a certain amount of songs, meaning you have to create a certain amount of copyrights in a year. But what was in every contract I've ever signed is 12 units. So if it's a three-way, that's a third of a unit. Okay, so that's 36 songs. If it's a half of a unit, that's 24. I always overwrote. I always had 80 to 100 to 120 every single year when all that was asked of me was 12 units. And yet I was in this mindset of like, I got to work more and more and more and more and more. And, this is so overdone and everything, but the insanity is doing the same thing over and over and over again, expecting different results, getting to the end of a year going, why am I exhausted? Why am I burned out? Why do I hate music at this moment? Because you were trying to light a fire with wet wood. It's just like you're trying to ignite something within yourself that isn't there. You know, when you listen to an artist, they can't fake if they're on fire passionately about the song or not. Adele, you do not have to guess if she believes every word that she says, right? You just don't. And I have to say I'm such a Taylor Swift fan. This latest record, it's like
It's so good.
it's so good because you just believe everything she says. And I'm so done with the questions of does she really write her songs? Oh my God, people. But I can, the Chicks, their new record is phenomenal. And it's just like I can go on and on and on and on with artists that I gravitate to, Halsey, and again, I can just go on and on, some known and some not known, of artists that they can't fake that. And guess what? Writers can't fake that either. They cannot turn in song after song after song and the fire be there if it's not there. And, you can know in your head how to write a song. You can know structure. You can know rhyme scheme. You can understand chords. You can understand chord structure. But if the fire of the story is not there, you have to go back and work on that because that is literally painting without paint. And I just want to encourage people to first and foremost, understand why you want to be a songwriter. If you want to be a songwriter for the awards and for the accolades and to hang out with the people you want to hang out with, just own that, okay? But if you want to be a writer because you have something to say, the biggest thing I can teach you is to learn how to say that in a unique way. One of the things I look for: phrasing, tone. It's all about the voice. It's about how someone can sing a line and make me believe it or not believe it. Is there a structure that you need to follow, a rhythm of language, syllables? There's some that work really well, but you cannot fake that. That is something you cannot fake. And if you feel like you need help with the vehicle, like if you feel like you need voice lessons, or if you feel like you need guitar lessons, or engineering lessons, do those. But more than that, work on yourself. Like, work on how to phrase it and say it. Sing it the way you would say it. Like, literally, in the last, I would say, few years, I turn on the record button and I sit with the piano and I just go for hours. And sometimes at minute 48, I'll say something that literally makes me just go numb. And I realize it took 47 minutes for me to get there. Right? Because I was trying to say all this like cool stuff, and yeah, I'm cool, I'm writing a song. And then all of a sudden, all of those barriers go down because I've exhausted myself. And then I say the thing that's real.
That it feels like too. That's like a very musical way of. I don't know if you ever read The Artist's Way by Julian Cameron.
Oh, God, yes.
It
Yes.
feels like that's like morning pages to the extreme. Like you're delving deep within the surface. Like the first couple, maybe 20 minutes are you just saying things you think you want to hear until you get to the core of what you
Yes.
really want to say. And you kind of have to
Yes.
sit with it.
Morning pages changed my life at 18. I was a big morning pages. I have a stack of books that I use. The War of Art is one, Writing Down the Bones, just on and on and on. If anyone ever wants to connect, they can also connect with you to talk with me. But I do feel like there can be some workshopping around, I don't want to say meditation as such, but just more of like uncovering the truths that you have to say as an artist and as a writer. That yes, you can go to Berkeley and spend a lot of money on a music degree, and kudos to those who choose that path. But I also think the thing that you offer the world, the thing that you offer the world is the fact that no one else is you. Every individual has a magic within them. And what I teach in my class is that a lot of people are marginalized because of the fact that they're female, or the fact that they are they're black, or the fact that they're a homosexual or gay or trans or whatever. Like, there's a lot of marginalized people, and maybe you find yourself being in the margins. But listen to me, mainstream meets the margins, and that's where seismic shift in art happens, is when we get the mainstream to move out into the margins of the people that have not had a voice. The other thing is, I find people that want to be songwriters, but they really don't. They don't know what else to do in their life. So one of the things I try to do is help people find their true skill set and their true passion and drive. If you love booking clubs and you love your friends, and you have a lot of talented friends, then book them in clubs. Not right now, it's not working, but you know what I'm saying. It's like, do the skill set that you truly have and that you love, because that's what you're going to work on the most. If I'm working with artists and they're constantly canceling writing appointments to go have a photo shoot, then be a model. You know,
Yeah.
you don't need to be a songwriter. If sitting in a room for 4 hours to write a song is just soul crushing to you, then don't do it. I spend hours and on hours alone, and now, you know, on a Zoom call or whatever, remotely working on songs. I pull up songs every single day. It is my one drive. But if I had a different set, you know, set of eyes over here wanting to be a business person, then I would wake up every day and want to do that. Just listen to yourself and be honest. Don't say I want to be a songwriter or a producer or, you know, an artist unless you truly want to put in the 10,000 hours. And literally that's what you're driven by. And there's no shame in wanting to learn how to write a song because it's a hobby. Everybody needs hobbies. If playing guitar is a hobby, great. Have a hobby, but don't blame the music business if they don't open their doors wide, if you haven't really walked in with a well thought out group of songs, or and that may have sounded a little shamey blamey, and I don't mean to do that. I just hear a lot of anger against the music business, and it's like the music business is a non-entity. That's just a group of people that have jobs. It's like no one is in charge of your success except for you. So, honesty. You've got to honestly sit down with yourself and figure out where your skill set lies, and then work on that and work on yourself.
All those things I couldn't agree more with when it comes to, but all those things too, like knowing what you want to do, it kind of ties back to the stillness that you talked about, spending time with yourself, being honest and sitting in those quiet moments and being like, I don't like this, and
Right.
being okay with that. And then, well, what do I like? What am I driven by? What motivates me? And then finding and connecting with that tribe of people
Right.
that are kind of like, I'm into that shit too. And it's like, wow. And then suddenly you're all building that community and that connection. And that's where real things are birthed. And that's where real things form, or lasting things too.
The little successes are what a career is built on. And you know, listen, I would all of that shit would come in my head and just write out, because if it wasn't a platinum record or a number one record, it didn't count. And that's just not true. It's just not true. Some of the songs in my career, in my catalog, that I am most proud of didn't have a ton of commercial success. I've been nominated for a Grammy and I didn't win. What did I focus on? The fact that I didn't win. Well, I remember years ago when just to get nominated for a Grammy meant something. And then when it came along, I spent months just like, well, we didn't win.
It's almost like when you didn't get nominated, it's just like, God, I'd love to get nominated. And then you do, and you're just like, I didn't win. And it's just like, it's the things that you're meant to do, the places you're meant to go, the people you're meant to connect with. You'll get there. You'll meet them. Don't worry. It's not, you don't have to come from a place of lack, but
Right.
you have to come from a place of authenticity, realness, defining what you do, that fire, and just seek it and just find what you, that sort of, what are the curious things that that pull you, that draw you. Cause when you follow that, that's when you end up in a place of realness, contentment. And it seems like that fire that was there just grows even more, and it just keeps on going. So that to me that's wonderful.
I stepped over to my desk to grab this card that I wrote out um, for my students. Is your special brand of genius. It exists. Your dream is meant to be achieved. Like, what comes into your brain of like your absolute best day ever? Pull that into your consciousness, and it is meant to be achieved. Like, we're not given these dreams and these desires for nothing. It's like dream your dream and then allow it to be achieved. I always thought it was me against the world and me against, all the powers that be. And one day I felt this shift of like, wait a minute, the universe is on my side.
Bonnie, this has been for me, like, also my soul and my creative spirit right now just feels so good because your words are inspiring, not just as a songwriter, but just as a person, your authenticity that just like comes through, and your compassion for, not just human beings, but especially fostering creativity and for people, no matter what level they're at, just kind of meeting them right there. And that is something that is truly needed more and more. So taking the time to talk to us, but just to share your perspective means the world.
Well, thank you guys. And this is such a life passion for me. So I encourage you to call me often and let's talk about these things because it is such a joy to talk on this level versus some songwriting podcast or just in a different focus. And I really appreciate what you're doing.
This is going to be one of many times that you will be here because this is just wonderful. I could talk to you for hours and hours. So we'll say this is like Bonnie Baker part 1, and then we'll just leave it there, and then part 2. I love it. But things that are coming up that you're excited about that you want to share.
Well, fall class at MTSU, we've reached our enrollment cap, so there's no more places there. Spring, they've opened up the class, so I'll be at MTSU. I'll be doing some workshops along this line. I do not have that fleshed out yet, but the bjewelb15@gmail.com is where people can reach me, or www.bkermusic.com is just a website that I have that just kind of tries to speak to people. I don't have things that I can say really out in the world yet, but just know that I'm in Nashville, in my room, working daily to create a community of healthy creatives who find each other. And I've got a group of about 44 that I've been communicating with, just people that have signed up, and I try to mix match co-writing situations. We try to do song starts. It is nothing official. It's just me talking to people. And so get in touch either with you guys at the podcast or me directly. And because I do believe there is a strong community out in the world of creators who are longing for community, and they're longing for connectedness. So I think that's what I'm supposed to be doing, is just connecting people. So that's my next step, is learning how to do those things on a meaningful level.
I love it. We're going to include all the info below to get in contact with Bonnie. And thank you for being here.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mike.
I hope you're feeling inspired and motivated after hearing Bonnie's story. She is one of the sweetest people I've ever had the pleasure talking to. And when we've only talked twice, but it felt like we were picking up after not seeing each other as friends for such a long time and being like, oh my goodness, how are you doing? That is just her personality. And the empathy that she has for other people, other songwriters, and wanting to help them get to where they need to be, connect them with who they need to meet, I just love. So I hope to have her back. It was fantastic. Hopefully you had a chance to check out my free series last week, How to Write with an Artist Over Zoom. And I sat down with my friend Maddie Finn and we wrote a song from scratch, how you can do that. And one of the crucial things that we talked about in that write was guitar skills, guitar skills, guitar skills. And if you've been listening to these episodes over and over, we talk about the importance of guitar technique, especially when it comes to songwriting. And that's why I'm excited to say for the next week, my class Riff to Radio is open. Riff to Radio helps you write killer riffs, some catchier hooks, and radio-ready songs. You do not need years of lessons, expensive gear, or really complicated theory. Just head to songwritingforguitar.com, and when you're at checkout, use the promo code podcast25 and you'll get $25 off the course. That's all for this week. Thank you so much for listening. This episode was edited and produced by the amazing Chris Fafalius. Until next time.